Hello friends, Tattooed Biker here. Thanks for stopping by. Before we get started, if you like hearing about the strange, mysterious, unexplained, or just downright creepy things in our world, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. It's completely free, and I upload a new video at least 3 times a week. Alright, let's get right into it. Tonight I've got 2 terrifying tales of the unexplained to share with you. Links to the original post are in the top of the description. So now, just kick back and enjoy the stories. Number 1. Just stay out of the woods. Originally posted by Redditor Yohane66. You know, the older we get, the more life seems to throw at us. From work to college, free time seems to constantly dwindle away from you. I'm a victim of this sad fact, but sometimes responsibilities just can't be avoided. Take my black Labrador, Biscuit, for example. She loves going for walks, so much that I have to take her every single day. Fortunately for me, my grandpa left us a big 10-acre piece of land upon his passing. Now, there was nothing really on this land except for some old sheds and hen houses. Safe to say it was always a peaceful stroll. One night, however, work and school kept me away till very late. When I finally returned, Biscuit was dying for her daily walk. There was a problem, though. It was pitch black outside. Usually we went during the day, but her whining was way too much. I knew I wasn't getting out of this, so I grabbed Biscuit's leash and prepared to head out the door. Before I could go, my mom would try and stop me, telling me it was late and I should just go to bed. Biscuit wasn't up for negotiating, though, as her tail wagged like a windmill. I promised her I'd be careful and return once the pooch did her business. It was a very humid and cloudy night. You couldn't even see the moon in the sky. The only thing that lit my path was a small flashlight. Considering this, I would nudge Biscuit to hurry up. Unfortunately for me, the dog took her sweet time. She sniffed around and even stopped to roll in the dirt. Meanwhile, I stood next to her impatiently, tapping my foot. I was very tired and could hear my bed calling my name. Sometimes I wonder why I pushed myself so hard. Personal problems aside, we would soon come to the old chicken coop. Whenever my grandpa was alive, it brimmed with plenty of hens and roosters. Now the small building looked like it would crumble with the tap of a finger. As I moved closer, I could hear a small commotion coming from inside. I figured it was just a rat, so I continued on with our stroll. As we walked away, however, something came scurrying out. I quickly grabbed my flashlight and aimed it at the creature. It was a large brown rabbit. As cute as a button to me, though, to Biscuit it was more of a late-night snack. She would forcefully pull away from me and chase after the poor bunny. I yelled at her to leave it alone, but she wasn't listening to me. When a predator has prey in its sights, why would it? Before I knew it, they would both disappear into the deep woods. I followed suit, but stopped just before hitting the entrance. It was so dark and the trees seemed utterly massive, like they would swallow me up if I went inside. Honestly, I thought about waiting for my dog to return on her own, though as a loving owner I couldn't take the risk of her getting lost in this maze. So, against my better judgment, I entered the darkness. Inside, I could hardly see anything at all. My flashlight was more or less useless. I didn't know where I was going or where Biscuit could be. To make things simpler, I began calling out her name. I yelled and yelled, but I didn't hear anything, not even the crack of a limb. This got pretty annoying as it was late and I was ready for bed. I tried to shout even louder, but there was no sign of her. My choices were limited to turning back or walking even deeper. As this dog was a loving member of our family, I couldn't just leave her behind. So I delved further into the abyss, uncertain that we would reunite. Everything was so quiet, not even the tiniest croak from a frog was heard. It was pretty weird, like I had slipped into another dimension where it was just me. Where were the deer, possums, and armadillos? And more importantly, where was my dog? After a while, I wondered how deep I'd gotten. I forgot my phone, so there was no way to see how much time had passed. All this aside, I couldn't help but have this eerie feeling in the back of my mind. Call it a hunch, but it felt like I was being watched. There weren't any living creatures in my view, but there was something out there. Regardless, I kept going, eventually coming upon a large clearing. There were but a few trees with the night sky visible for the first time in forever. I wanted to let out a sigh of relief, but my job wasn't done yet, so I had to keep searching. But just then, the sounds of whimpering filled the air. That cry was unmistakable. It was Biscuit. I pointed my light in every direction, desperately, trying to reunite with my furry friend. Finally, I would see her lying beneath a tree. I ran up to my dog and kneeled down next to her. At first I thought she was hurt, but this didn't seem to be the case. Instead, she was shivering in fear and refused to move from that spot. Since her leash was still attached, I began to tug on it. For some reason, though, my poor Biscuit wouldn't budge. Not knowing why, I began to shine my flashlight and investigate the area. Biscuit was as big as a bear. I didn't think anything could spook her to such an extent. My search didn't yield much either, as the woods seemed empty. I was puzzled as to what was wrong. The dog acted like she saw a ghost. Before I could do anything else, however, Biscuit would jump to her feet and begin to growl. Her fangs were shining and every hair on the animal's body stood up. I had no idea what was going on, but I noticed her gaze was fixated at the top of a nearby tree. I then shined my light and saw something that shook me to my core. Standing in the tree was a massive creature, straight out of an urban legend. The being was at least 7 feet tall, with pale and leathery skin. Its eyes glowed bright red like a vehicle's taillights, not to mention a set of massive wings that wrapped around its body like a cape. Whatever this thing was, it must have hated flashlights, as whenever the beam hit its face, the creature let out this horrifying shriek. Of course, this was my signal to run, and I then grabbed Biscuit by the leash and bolted. Me and my dog ran and ran, refusing to look back at that demon. No matter how fast we were, I could hear its flapping wings right above us. I couldn't believe this. We were actually being chased by a monster. My lungs felt like they were about to explode from all the running. So naturally, I started slowing down. What happened next, however, had convinced me that I was going to die. As the creature made a quick landing in front of me, blocking my path, I was in shock and froze as he looked upon me with those godforsaken eyes. The glow they gave off was hypnotic, like the being was peering into my soul. I was so scared to the point where my bladder let loose and urine ran down my leg. The monster then reached out one of his long, white arms at me. I swore that my legs moved closer to him on their own. Before he could cause me harm, however, Biscuit would jump into action. My brave girl would take him to the ground and bite into his chalky flesh. The creature let out a blood-curdling screech as she did. Meanwhile, I was still paralyzed in utter terror. In my mind, I knew that this thing was way stronger than Biscuit. There was only a matter of time before it overpowered and hurt her. I, for one, refused to lose my sweet pooch to this freak. So I clenched my fist and pushed all the fear deep down inside. While they fought, I ran up and snatched my dog by her leash. With all my might, I then pulled her off and started running. As we made our escape, the creature kept on with its horrible screeching. It was so loud, I felt like my ears were going to bleed. Regardless, we had to keep moving. It was our only option. Thankfully, we would finally make it out of the woods. This was no time for breaks, though, as we sprinted all the way back to the house. Upon arrival, I slammed the door and rushed to my mother's room. There, I informed her of our terrifying near-death experience. Of course, being an old country girl, she refused to believe me. No matter what I swore on, she just shook her head. She told me that I was just tired and needed to get some rest. That if anything, it was probably a bat or something. In anger, I found myself stomping out of her room. I knew what I saw and would remember it for the rest of my life. Figuring no one else would believe me, I just went to bed. That entire night, Biscuit cuddled next to me, still shaking with dread. The next morning, life would go back to normal. It was time for me to wake up and go to school. I really wanted to just stay in bed and recover from what happened. Unfortunately, since my grades weren't all that great, I couldn't afford to miss. Biscuit stayed in bed, and I headed out to my truck. As soon as I took my first steps into the yard, I noticed something odd. There was this strange green liquid staining the ground. I bent down to investigate further, but it was dry to the touch. It sort of favored blood from the look, but there was no way to be sure. Deciding to shrug it off, I went on with my day. When I made it to my vehicle, however, my calm morning would end, as my driver's side door had a deep set of claw marks carved into it. There were only 4 by my count, and they definitely weren't here yesterday. I didn't want to admit it, but I knew the horrifying reason for this. That thing followed us home last night, and it knows where I live. Number 2. I keep seeing things outside my balcony at night. Originally posted by Redditor Pickelzoftruth. I still lived with my parents in a pretty remote area outside of town. Our house has 2 stories with an attic. Me and my older sister's rooms are on the second, while my parents are downstairs. My room has a small balcony with a sliding glass door connecting it to my room. The door is opposite of my bed, and I've always hated the looming darkness that overtakes it at night. The balcony overlooks a very dense forest, and to the right you can see the unpaved road leading from our house into town. This all started when my sister left for some extracurricular program or camp so that she could get into a good college. It was a big goodbye, considering she was leaving for a month and she had never done that sort of thing before. It was about sunset as well, and I knew my dad wouldn't be back for at least an hour. I watched her get in the passenger car door as my dad climbed into the driver's side, and the car began to pull out of the driveway. I went back upstairs to my room and pulled out my phone. I sat on my bed and started scrolling through TikTok when a flash of headlights outside my balcony window caught my attention. The sun was drifting down the horizon at this point, flooding my room with a red glow. I walked over to the balcony and slid open the door. The air was cold and thin, and the hairs on my arms stood up due to the temperature change. As I glanced around, I noticed our car driving down the road. I leaned against the balcony to see them for as long as I could, and suddenly darted my gaze over to the left. My heart sank as I saw something, a shadow, shrink into the bushes lining the forest edge. It was most likely a wild animal, but still it felt wrong. The figure looked too human. I quickly stepped back inside and rushed downstairs. I worryingly knocked on my mom's door, and she opened it and asked what my problem was. "I saw someone run into the bushes outside," I said. I don't know what I thought she was going to do, but she said, Probably an animal. Just leave me alone. And shut the door abruptly. I stared at the door for a good 15 seconds before deciding to turn to my room. I wanted to distract myself with my phone, but as the day turned to night and as the rain started to pour, I couldn't help but glance at the balcony door a few times. Finally, I saw the familiar lights from my dad's car returning from the road it left on. It made me feel a bit safer. Later that night, I'd put my phone down and decided to rest. My eyes were heavy and stung a little from staring at my phone's blue light screen. The sound of heavy rain filled my ears as I drifted off to sleep. A different sound jolted me awake. The sound of light tapping on glass, and of course, it was on the balcony door. I threw my covers off and flicked the light on, staring at the void on my balcony in terror. Nothing was there. "Dad!" I yelled. "Come up here, please." There was no answer. So I stormed my way downstairs and pounded on my parents' bedroom door. My mom opened the door once again with a look of frustration. "It's fucking 1 a.m. What's your problem?" she said. "My problem is someone was tapping on my balcony window," I half shouted back. "Fine." She glared with tired eyes and made her way upstairs. I followed close behind her, and finally we made it to my bedroom. My door was wide open, just as I had left it, but so was my balcony door. "Did you open that?" she asked, and suddenly she seemed a bit more awake. "No," I said, completely terrified. "Lock yourself in the bathroom and call the police. Don't come out unless I say," she ordered. I did as she said, and I was crying at this point. My shaky hands locked the door and dialed the buttons on my phone. 911, what's your emergency?" the operator said. Completely panicked, I replied with my address, and then, "Someone's broken into our house. The balcony door was open." As I answered the operator's questions, I noticed my volume and brought my voice down to a whisper. It was too quiet. Suddenly, I heard my mom scream in terror and the door slammed. "Are you coming?" I said. "I've dispatched police and they are on their way. Stay on the line," the operator replied. I was in that bathroom for 10 minutes until I heard the sounds of sirens in the distance. I was visibly shaking in fear when they found me and they escorted me out of the house. Thankfully, I saw my mom alive outside. From there, I was told what happened to her. My mom ran downstairs and grabbed a kitchen knife and then around to lock all the doors. Then she locked herself in her room again. As she sat on the bed, something under the bed grabbed her foot. She screamed and ran out of the room, slamming the door and running outside. My dad didn't come back home from his drive that night. He stayed at a motel because of a rainstorm that made it too hard to drive back home. I don't know who I saw driving back, but it wasn't my dad. Somehow, though, I knew it was our car. It looked the exact same. The next day, we decided to move in with my grandparents, who lived a few towns away, and on the way we picked up my sister from her program. The police had found evidence for everything we had explained, but they had also found something truly disturbing. Several hearts were drawn on the outside of my balcony door, with presumably someone's finger, and the police detailed that some of them were weeks old. No fingerprints were found. I'm writing this in my grandparents' house, and I'm afraid to sleep again. There's a window in this room too, and I have the shutters closed. Still, it doesn't make me feel any better. And there it is. All I have for this time. Thanks for visiting. If you enjoyed the content, please take a moment to like the video and consider subscribing. It only takes a second and it really helps out the channel. Also, if you have a story or paranormal experience that you'd like to see related here, Just send an email to the address pinned in the comments below. Let me know how you'd like to be credited for your story, or if you'd prefer to simply remain anonymous. Either way, I'll be sure and respect your wishes. So thanks again. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Biker out.